decided they wanted a Marvel comic based on the G.I. Joe material, they came to Marvel. And you have to understand that at that time, toy licensed comics were the bottom of the barrel. Since the licensing fee came right off the top, so that meant that the artists and writers with the top rates, were completely out of the picture. So it got down to not even the B list, but the C list. So at the time, I was a full editor at Marvel, but I had been an artist for the first 10, 15 years of my work in the comics biz, and all the editors were writers. They didn't take kindly to artists wanted to write the stuff for themselves. And I couldn't get a single editor to give me any writing work. I tried for like a long time, couldn't get, they weren't interested. So Hasbro came and they wanted a comic. And so the editor-in-chief asked every single contract writer, and they all turned it down. So that, he figured, well, all the editors are writers too, so he started at the other end of the car. I was the last office. And he came down the hall and asked every editor, every assistant editor, and every assistant or intern, and every single one turned him down, and I was the last office, and I took it not because I really was dying to write G.I. Joe, but I wanted to get my foot in the door doing some writing. And I've said it before, but frankly, if they had offered me Barbie, I would have taken Barbie. And that's how I got the gig. When they said G.I. Joe, I thought, it was the only G.I. Joe that I knew of was the 12-inch posable action figure. The use of the word doll was anathema. It's like, no, it's like a cursed word. You can't say that in connection with a military action figure, posable military action figure. So yeah, so I thought, oh, it's that big guy, and they said, no, we're doing these 3 3/4 inch guys because it was the first oil crisis, and 12 inches of plastic was just not doable anymore. So it shrank down considerably, and they were going to be different guys instead of a generic, one big generic figure. They were going to be characters, but they didn't have characters. They only had what Hasbro had when they walked in the door at Marvel was they had 10 figures, infantry, intelligence, mortar, machine gunner, whatever, and that's what they had. They really didn't have anything more than what I saw were black and white line drawings, and above one it said infantry, above the next it said machine gunner, and that was it. So it's very hard to do a story with starting from that. So I had to sit down and figure out who these people were, give them names, give them backgrounds, and build characters. I think when they first came to Marvel with the figure drawings, there was no adversary. So the first thing that we said when we went into a meeting in in the conference room was like, well, who are the bad guys? You know, and they said, well, we don't have any. And I said, well, what are these guys going to do? Just sort of march? Or have inspections? You know? And there was an editor, a fantastic guy and a genius named Archie Goodwin. He said, well, I mean, there should be some organized bad guys. You know, we've got, in the Marvel continuity, we've got Hydra, who is like the bad guys that S.H.I.E.L.D. fights, and they're sort of like, they've got masks, and they're sort of paramilitary, and they're sort of almost Nazi-esque, you know. And they're into like ceremonial stuff. It's paranoid conspiracy stuff. So we've got one called Hydra. Why don't we just call this Cobra? Everybody said, okay. And that was that. Hasbro hadn't even thought about having that, and Cobra became literally half the line, So when we were putting out when I was trying to put together the first issue, I got down to like working out the story, and then I'm because I started out as an artist, I tend to think in terms of the visual storytelling, and I realized every single one of these Cobra characters has got a mask. There's no face. How do you do dramaturgy, with no agents of expression? So I said, well, okay, I'll solve two problems here with one stroke. I'll create this female character and put her in this like tight-fitting black leather outfit, and she won't have a mask. So you'll have one Cobra character that Cobra Commander can talk to, and she can have expressions. And that was the Baroness. And there had been no plans to do a Baroness figure, but as soon as she hit the comic book pages and they got all this reaction from the kids, I said, okay. And she became a really popular character. They did the Scarlet character figure grudgingly. It's like, I don't know if we want to have a girl in there, because if it's a girl action figure, that's actually a doll. And how do you cross that psychological barrier and get a 10-year-old boy to buy what's basically a doll? There's this terrible monster of procrastination and fear. I'd wanted to get these writing gigs, but I'd never really done a monthly book, written one. And it wasn't a genre that I was particularly interested in. I got into the business because I wanted to do funny animals, and then I ended up doing all this other stuff because it was the work that was available. I really didn't want to do superheroes. I ended up doing superheroes. But I remember being in utter panic mode, having accepted this gig, going, oh, what the heck am I going to do? I mean, I have no idea what this story should be. And I just procrastinated in panic mode for probably a couple of weeks. Then I realized, I had to hand it in about 3 days or something. And what I probably do is what I probably still do today is well, okay, I'll give them a problem and have them solve the problem. You know, so what's the problem? Okay, they have to rescue somebody. Who do they have to rescue? Blah, blah, blah. And, you know, you build it piece by piece like that. So once I figured out, okay, that they have to rescue somebody, how do I make that different? And I thought, well, what if they have to rescue somebody they don't particularly like? You know, somebody whose views aren't, you know, their views. You know, that's that changes up the situation. You know, gives it a little more drama. And you know, I went down the line piece by piece, trying to do that, going, well, what's the obvious thing here, and what maybe that's not what I shouldn't do. That's how I approached it. But I remember finishing it and handing it in and thinking, oh hell, what am I going to do now? I have no idea where to take this. But of course, I put it off until the last possible minute, and then, you know, run around like a chicken with his head cut off. What's the story going to be? That never changed. I thought, oh, this is, I'm going to get really good at this sooner or later, and it'll be just like falling off a log. But it's, all these years later, it's still exactly the same. I have no idea. That it's the utter fear that forces me to actually come up with something.